So as you guys know, I've been keeping an eye on Mafia. And Mafia, the Old Country, is a game that's kind of, I mean, people are looking at it, cautiously optimistic, but I do think that there is a little bit of skepticism with it, especially when it didn't show up to Summer Games Fest or anything. Like, people were like, well, this is a little weird. I would have expected to see it. And it's not because it looks bad. It looks good. The problem is just like, it's priced lower and they haven't shown a lot of like actual gameplay. This is what you're seeing on screen. This is the gameplay trailer. Like, this is the actual thing. And even then, like, we're not really seeing a lot of extended gameplay. We're seeing like, okay, crouch, stealth takedown. Okay, that looked good. Okay, then it's already over. So we're not seeing a lot of smooth gameplay. We're seeing a bunch of little bitty snippets. And then this also looks to have a lot of like custom camera work applied to it. This doesn't look like totally unedited gameplay. I mean, maybe it is, but like that super tight turnaround looked kind of, it didn't look like that would be possible with a like regular controller movement. So I would like to see more. I would like to see more. And when I was talking to Jor was saying how he expects that this game is probably going to be like 4 or 5 hours. He thinks it's going to be really, really short, which is why they have not shown a whole lot of it. And what they have shown is fairly similar to other things we've seen. I'm not sure. It might be really short. It might be, 10, 11 hours long. I think the sweet spot for me would be about 10 to 12 hours. I think that would be a good spot for it, especially if they can maintain high production value throughout. But we haven't heard a lot about it. Until yesterday, they did an AMA or Q&A. I guess not anything, but they did a Q&A on their subreddit where they answered a bunch of questions from the community. And they selected these questions themselves. So they said they were common questions. So I think what we'll be able to tell through here, there are some interesting questions in here, but some that I'm not particularly interested in. But I think the other thing to look at is perhaps the questions that are not asked, the questions that are not brought up, because that might also tell us a good amount of things as well. So they chose to come out and answer, is Mafia the Old Country an open world game? They say no. Mafia, the Old Country is not an open world game. Enzo's story unfolds in a structured cinematic way rather than choosing missions or mission orders across a sandbox map. If you're a longtime fan of the franchise, Mafia, the Old Country is structured similarly to Mafia 1 and Mafia 2, meaning that there will still be moments when players can leisurely take in the sights and sounds of early 1900s Sicily and maybe even discover a few collectibles on the way. This is the thing. I think it's going to play much more similar to Mafia Definitive Edition or Mafia 1 if you played that. There are moments where you can kind of pause, look through the map or whatever, or maybe there's a sequence where you're driving quickly through a wide map, but maybe think of it as wide linear, like large space, but you're still going from A to B. It's not like they're just totally opening it up for you to do whatever. It's pretty focused. Uncharted, I think maybe closer to Uncharted: The Lost Legacy. That's the vibe I'm getting. Open world game, that is a valid question to ask. That would make sense. Why did you choose to create a linear story game, especially in light of Mafia 3, which was an attempt at a totally new direction, maybe not totally new, but like a new direction for the franchise that was much broader, totally open world, much closer to typical open world games of that time where it's clear this base and then level up each of the crime bosses in that area and, grind it out. Very Ubisoft. They said, to quote Nick Baines, president of Hangar 13, the developer, who shared this during the developer panel at PAX East, quote, with this title, we drew a lot of inspiration from the structure of Mafia Definitive Edition and Mafia 2, particularly how their focused linear storytelling resonated with players. Our goal with Mafia, the Old Country, is to deliver that same kind of narrative experience that feels distinctly Mafia while introducing a brand new story and setting. And this is like, for me, this is what I want. Mafia 3 was an interesting experiment, but I think it was a product of its time. And even then, it was not executed super well. I don't think just because you tried open world, like grind fest gaming in 2016, that doesn't mean that we need to do that again this time and try again. I don't think that that's what your fans want. And it's not what they clearly connected with. The reception was not great. What they've said they loved is Mafia Definitive Edition, Mafia 1 and Mafia 2. That's what people really liked, and that's what they were hoping Mafia 3 would be, and it just wasn't. So instead of trying to do that again, thankfully, they're listening to the feedback and going back to what they did well, which I personally appreciate. They continue, with Mafia: The Old Country, we want you to feel like you're playing through a classic mob movie. Your journey throughout the game follows Enzo's descent into the dark criminal underworld of 1900s Sicily, with each tightly paced mission and cutscene conveying the weight of a gritty gangster drama. We can't wait for you to experience all the carefully crafted moments that tell Enzo's story. And again, tighter pacing, more linear. I'm okay with that. It's also, you know, maybe it is closer to Uncharted than it is to Mafia Definitive Edition, but either way, I think that's much better suited for their talents and their skill sets compared to like trying to make another open world game, you know. What inspired the combat mechanics and design in Mafia: The Old Country? Our vision for combat was to immerse players deeply in the brutal, often desperate reality of the criminal underworld in 1900 Sicily. This isn't an era of advanced weaponry or easy brawls. It's a time where every confrontation has weight, and survival often comes down to your will to live. The firearms of the early 1900s, for instance, are less forgiving than their modern counterparts. They demand more deliberate use of cover, careful resource management, and knowing how to make every single shot count. Knife fights are at the heart of combat in Mafia: The Old Country. In an era when many didn't have access to guns, disputes were often settled the traditional way, with a blade. In 1900 Sicily, fights were personal, up close, and vicious. That historical reality shaped how we designed our combat system, which, cool. They also say because it's an origin story for Mafia, you don't need to play the previous Mafia games, which of course makes sense. What makes Enzo a unique protagonist compared to Vito, Lincoln, and Tommy? They say Tommy Angelo, Vito Scaletta, and Lincoln Clay are all men who were irrevocably shaped by American cities while navigating different eras of organized crime in the United States. Each of our protagonists in the Mafia franchise found their way into organized crime through a different path. Lincoln Clay, for example, was fueled by an all-consuming need for revenge. Vito Scaletta was enticed by the promise of wealth and power. When we forged Enzo Favara's story for Mafia: The Old Country, we returned to the birthplace of Mafia to explore a motivation that is far more fundamental: freedom. Enzo's story begins not with a choice, but with a primal fight for survival. Having been sold into a brutal forced labor of the Sicilian sulfur mines as a boy, he endured a stolen childhood until a path opened to salvation to him. The path into the Torrisi crime family doesn't represent greed or vengeance. It offers the one thing he's never had: a chance to shape his own destiny. The sacrifices he'll face and the kind of honor he might find or forfeit will be uniquely his own, born from an entirely new struggle, far removed from the motivations of previous protagonists. Which does, honestly, I do think he's going to be a very interesting protagonist. I'm genuinely excited to see how that story develops, because it is very different. Is there an online mode or multiplayer? They say it's focused on delivering cinematic single-player experience. At this time, there are no plans for multiplayer or online modes. At this time. I don't think they'll ever do it, but they're just saying at this time, I guess, to save the possibility of a multiplayer spin-off, right? Will the game have DLC? For those who want to descend into the criminal underworld in style, the deluxe edition offers a variety of bonuses for your collection. As for story DLC, we are currently focusing on making the base game complete and gripping narrative experience from start to finish, one that feels like a full, satisfying saga on its own. That said, we're always listening to what resonates with you, looking forward to your thoughts and suggestions for what you'd love to see in the world of Mafia. So this to me also sounds like, no, they don't have plans for story DLC, but if it goes really, really well, maybe they will. But I would not get my hopes up. I think if they were working on a DLC expansion or something, we would hear about it. Is it similar or different to other games in the genre? They mainly are saying that, like, the birthplace of organized crime itself, playing Mafia: The Old Country is like playing through a classic mob movie featuring high-stakes chases, brutal gunplay, knife play, tense life-or-death situations, and more. We're immersing you not only in a setting of historical authenticity, but also in a compelling story about loyalty, betrayal, and sacrifice. Okay. Burning the Saint card is inspired by an initiation ritual used by the Sicilian Mafia. Okay. Who's making a return? I mean, they're not gonna tell us spoilers. Will you show us more gameplay footage before launch? Big question. Will you show us more gameplay footage? Great question. What did they say? Yes. There will be more opportunities to get a glimpse of Mafia the Old Country's gameplay as we approach launch. To stay up to date on the development of Mafia the Old Country, make sure to follow our social channels for the latest updates. We'll share more about Mafia the Old Country in the lead up to August 8th, so stay tuned. The loyalty you've shown the Mafia legacy is not taken lightly, and we appreciate you joining us on this journey. So they say there's going to be more. They say there's going to be more. So we'll see. They've also announced that they've gone gold. So the game is done. They are now officially in the polish phase. Whoops, wrong button. Yeah, surprise ending to the stream. My chief concern is just, similar to what Jor said, I'd be concerned about overall length and or polish. The fact we've not seen any hands-on stuff is weird to me. I would think at this point they would have done something. Like they would have invited somebody out to play test the game or do like 20-30 minute demo at Summer Games Fest or something like that, but they didn't have any of that. They have stayed pretty well isolated, and maybe it's just because they're like, hey, the game's going to speak for itself when it's released. It's going to review really well and people are going to love it, so why bother? Which, yeah, if the game is really, really good, you don't need to bother with any of that if word of mouth is really, really good. But we'll just have to wait and see. I do see, in the footage they have released, there's a lot of evidence of like temporal upscalers. So things like FSR, for example, there's some artifacting from that being used, which is not surprising. Every game nowadays uses temporal upscalers and DLSS or FSR technologies to hit fidelity and frame rate targets, but it's also an indication sometimes of a lack of optimization. And maybe the reason we're not seeing a lot of the game is because optimization's been a struggle. We just don't know. We don't know. But one way to assuage those concerns is to just give people access or an uncut gameplay demo or something like that. Even if it's just like 10 minutes of gameplay, just like we got for Little Nightmares. We just looked at this. Little Nightmares, they just revealed a full 11 minutes of uncut gameplay showcasing what it's like to play the game. Do this, just 11 minutes of the game. Put it out there, be like, this is what it looks like, and say this is running on a base PS5. Do something like that. Super easy peasy. It'll give people a lot of confidence, I think, in the quality of the final product. I think maybe they will do that in the run-up. Maybe in July, they'll, like late July, they'll do something closer to launch. Their goal might just be to do a tighter, like, marketing cycle. Don't spend a ton of time doing it in the months up to launch, but maybe do it just 2 weeks before launch and just do it all in the course of like 2 weeks. I don't know, but I'm excited to see more, and I know a lot of other people are excited to see more. It was funny when I went to the Borderlands event, that was at 2K at their offices, and of course 2K also owns and is publishing Mafia. And so while I was there, it was funny because the 2K like creator relations or whatever guy, he was like, so you guys excited for Borderlands? And everybody is there for a Borderlands event. So they're like, yeah, I'm really excited. I'm excited to see what they got. And then he said, what other games are you looking forward to this year? Every single person was like, Mafia. Really excited for Mafia. Everybody, if you have anything about Mafia, please let us know. Very excited. Very excited. So there's interest out there, I'm sure. They just gotta show us more. We want to see more. I hope Mafia will be good. We had terrible flops recently. Yeah, well, and I'm rooting for them specifically because, they've done great stuff in the past. It's just, Mafia 3 was a bit of a train wreck. I hope that this is not that, but I guess time will tell. My chief fear and like worst case scenario would be if it turns out to be sort of a Hellblade 2 situation. If it's like, yeah, it looks really good, but it's
Jimbo 404 donated $10 through Super Chat. Hangar 13 was in trouble after Mafia 3, so they followed their passions for Mafia 1 and it performed way better, so now I hope they can deliver more and 2K elevates them as a top-level studio.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. My fear with and for them is that they did experience some blowback after Mafia 3 for sure, but they were also hit with several waves of layoffs, unfortunately, back in like 2022. Like 50 people got laid off in their California office. Former studio head Hayden Blackman resigned earlier that month. And you could, I guess there's two ways you could look at it. You could say, oh no, they laid off some of the guys that could have been really instrumental in helping pull off a sort of a comeback, just a comeback. Maybe. Or you could look at it as they cleaned house from the guys that were working on Mafia 3 and that were working on some of the other stuff that they were caught in development hell with. We just don't know. They say after shipping Mafia 3, Hangar 13, which also includes the remains of 2K Czech, prototyped a number of original IP, but the studio faced layoffs in 2017 and 18, and eventually saw most of its new projects canceled, including one codenamed Volt, which parent company Take-Two quietly shut down last November despite already investing over $50 million into it. The rapid cancellations left hundreds of developers without a project. Ever since, many developers at Hangar 13 have been aimlessly shifting around from one Take-Two game to another, as Kotaku reported earlier this month. The Brighton office is currently leading early production on the new Mafia prequel that will be built in Unreal Engine 5. The game's currently planned to take place in Italy, but Take-Two has also been treating Hangar 13 like an in-source studio, using it to assist in development on other published games like Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, Kerbal Space Program 2, and Marvel's Midnight Suns. So it basically was just a studio that was kind of too big and didn't have a clear project lined up except for this Mafia prequel, but that was in pre-production, so they didn't have anything for the other devs to do. So they laid off a bunch of them, and then they had the other ones help with other games. And then, you know, Mafia has been ramped up, no doubt, in the last couple of years. And Mafia Definitive Edition launched in 2020. So Mafia Definitive Edition launched in September 2020.
donated $10 through Super Chat. My main gripe with Mafia 3 was that it had a relatively strong opening storyline, but after that, it just became repetitive gameplay.
Yeah, well, and you could tell once they hit the point where they're like, okay, and then this is where players will make their own fun by grinding this out. It's something that inflates gameplay hours for sure, but it was really tedious because it was all about, you know, it was very almost like Far Cry 6 and Far Cry 5 and how they handled it. So it's just, I think, again, it was a product of its time, but especially if they were to try to do that same type of game again today, it would not have gone over well, for sure. But yeah, Mafia Definitive Edition, this launched in 2020. They saw layoffs in a couple of years after that, even still. But who knows, maybe they were laying off people that were working on those games that got canceled, and they were just doubling down and promoting and expanding the Mafia team because Definitive Edition did well. We just don't know. I'm hoping they make a comeback and Hangar 13 gets back, you know, coming out swinging, because it'd be really cool to have them back and to get more Mafia games. It would be really, really cool, but who knows? I guess we'll see.
He took my thing.